This is For the Rest of Us with Ken and Megan Castellan, a podcast about theology, faith, the Bible, and life. You know, for the rest of us. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. It's episode 2 of For the Rest of Us with Ken and Megan Castellan. As per usual, you could probably tell, I am not Ken and Megan. I'm Adam Eichelberger. I'm the Director of Communications for the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York, and I am your co-host. I will be going through all of these conversations with Ken and Megan. Consider me the Scooby-Doo to her Shaggy as we solve this big mystery of life together in the mystery machine that we call the Episcopal faith. Megan, it is so good to get into another episode. What do you have for us to talk about today?
Today, we are discussing the light and breezy subject of the book of Revelation and the end of the world.
Oh, I mean, an easy one, right? This is just simple, casual, over coffee conversation. So what do you got?
So I was thinking about this list of topics before Christmas, and one of the things that we read in church during Advent is Revelation, and always people hate it because it's depressing and terrifying. And they're like, why do we read this right before Christmas? And so I thought we could talk about it on the podcast. And then we aren't recording this until January, and California is on fire. And we are being reminded viscerally of climate change and all of the things in nature that can kill us and destroy the world. And we are also staring down the barrel of a new presidential administration, which feels at once daunting and alarming. So maybe it's a perfect time to talk about Revelation and all the stuff that's in there. I will confess that it is probably the most controversial book in the Bible. It is also my favorite. Because it is literally a secret code, but not in the way we usually are used to thinking of it. So, Adam, we're about the same age, I think.
Right.
Generational cohort of a sort. Do you remember the Left Behind series?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Unfortunately, even in my very Catholic upbringing, I managed to get sucked into the evangelical, apocalyptic, lit category that kind of ripped through the zeitgeist in like the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. So yes, I remember the books and I remember the movies.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Kirk Cameron was running around being left behind and stuff happened. So I will confess, I, being the nerdy Episcopalian child that I was, did not actually read the books. I think I read half of one or watched the movie, but I remember the thing.
It's probably enough.
Yeah. And I remember my friends being super into it and trying to make me read it so that I would be saved. And, you know, they were worried about my little soul. But a lot of what we think of as being in Revelation is taken from those movies.
Okay.
The idea in the popular zeitgeist that Jesus will come back. When that happens, there will be what's called in the books the Rapture.
Right.
People will physically lift up into the air, abandon their clothes and their cars and their dogs and stuff. Look at the bumper stickers that say this car will be driverless in the event of the rapture. That's in the book. And then once the good people are gone, the rest of us, the bad people, will be left to suffer literally 1,000 years of war, plagues, famine, fire, the worst you can imagine, as Jesus puts us all to death for our unfaith.
Right. Totally makes sense.
Right. Totally what a loving God would do. Yeah.
Exactly.
The problem is none of that is in the Bible.
Okay, so I think that this is a good thing for us to dive into because I think that regardless of our exposure to this kind of like writing and even theology, this has managed to kind of creep its way into how we look at Christianity specifically in America. So
Yes.
expound.
Yeah, there's no rapture in the Bible.
Okay.
Uh,
There you
we'll
go, friends.
we'll probably dive into the rapture itself in another episode, but the rapture was made up in the 1890s by a guy named John Francis Darby,
Okay.
who took a verse wildly out of context in Second Colossians that talks about the faithful will rise up to meet him in the air when the trumpet sounds. Um, he from that got this whole idea of the rapture. It's not in the Bible, not a real thing, made up. What is in Revelation, however, is much cooler. But because the idea of the rapture and everything John Francis Darby kind of put around it became so popular in America through um, he wrote a study Bible and he put this theology of the rapture in the notes of the study Bible, and it became the best-selling study Bible through the 20th century. So nearly if you bought any Protestant English uh, language Bible in the US, you probably got it with a set of what's called the Schofield Study Notes.
Yes, I do know that term for sure.
Those notes are great. They also include that theology. So if you start to read the notes on the side, they will say, "Ah, yes, this verse in Second Colossians refers to the rapture." And then it delineates what the rapture is. So this proliferated this idea throughout America, and it became really big. So for most people, we assume that it's real because it just spread so fast. But again, it's not a thing.
Well, I think also historically, it's important to remember kind of in that post Civil War Reconstruction era, leading into the earliest and even the mid 20th century. That's where we see this boom in street preaching and like tent revival meetings, specifically in areas like in the South, where this stuff kind of starts to creep and
Right.
rise up.
Right, and where we live. We
Right.
live in upstate New York, also known as the burned over district.
Right.
This is a hotbed of crazy cults who think that the end times are gonna come next week, and so in preparation, they need to kind of seclude themselves away, form a new society, a new set of rules, and then when that doesn't happen, they just become a little crazy, like community. The Oneida community that now makes silverware, the Shakers have been up here, um, a whole group the Nexium cult is up here. Upstate New York filled the Mormons started here. Um, Upstate New York filled with, apocalyptic preaching and thinking, particularly in this, mid-1800s time, through to the present. Has something to do with the canals, maybe?
Something in the
Um,
water.
the water, I don't know. Anyway, all of which is to say, the idea of the rapture is a relatively modern interpolation to Revelation.
Got it.
Revelation itself, is actually something much cooler.
Okay.
So it's part of a genre of literature that would have been familiar to the followers of Jesus. There's a whole genre of literature like this called apocalypses or unveiling. Um, and it was something that people would write during times of immense oppression, when the government had really gone off the rails, when they were part of a small oppressed minority. Um, and it was dependent on three things. There are always three things you look for when you're identifying an apocalypse. Um, there is there are parallels between what's happening in heaven and what's happening on earth.
Hmm.
There's a lot of symbolism. Everything means something else. And the kind of big point of an apocalypse is that everything is hopeless. Your situation on earth is absolutely hopeless. You're about to be wiped out. But God comes in and fixes it.
Okay.
God comes in and sets things right.
Right.
And so the point of apocalypse is that it is meant to um, kind of provide hope for people who are absolutely positively hopeless.
Okay.
And so that's why Revelation is so cool. Revelation, the text, we know, was written like late 150, 120, relatively late from the other things in the canon that we have. But it was written by one of the oppressed Christian communities during one of the Roman persecutions. Roman persecutions sort of would kind of wax and wane. Sometimes Rome would ignore the Christians. Sometimes Rome would be really into throwing Christians to the lions. It would kind of depend on how things were going in the empire overall.
Mm.
Revelation seemed to have been written in a moment where things were particularly bad. Lots of hiding in the catacombs, lots of people having been drug off. So it was pretty dire. The text starts out with our dude John. Everybody's named John in the New Testament. It's just a good name. Having, professed to see this vision, which again, typical of apocalypses, you're always having visions, and it's a message from God, this like vast allegory to provide the people with hope. John presents the beginning part of the allegory, 7 letters to 7 churches. So we know that there are different house churches scattered throughout the Roman Empire. And the overall message is things are hard. Things are going bad. You're being dragged off. However, God sees you, and God has a couple of pointers to get better. But God sees you, and if you stay faithful, it's going to be okay. God sees you, and God sees what you're going through. So it's going to be okay. You've not been lost. You are present in the sight of God. The initial image is each church has a golden lampstand
Mhm.
in the presence of God, right up there with God. So the churches, you can imagine the people in the church kind of huddled together, reading this and seeing themselves in the worst of conditions, seeing themselves in the presence of God. And then, we get into the stuff with, beasts and dragons and
Right, the cool stuff.
the cool like anime type stuff. It's pretty clear if you also look at other contemporary texts, because we have other apocalypses. Like there are apocalypses that were written around the Old Testament times, written under other empires. The beast is Rome
Mm.
and,
Okay.
and other Roman adjacent things. We have 7 heads a lot of the times. And a lot of the times the text will say the beast is like around, or the 7 heads or the 7 hills. Rome is famously founded on 7 hills. It'll have 10 crowns. There were 10 Roman emperors before Diocletian, which we think was the Roman emperor under the persecution that was super bad. Pretty clearly the beast running around is Rome itself, this vast empire that seems to control everything. This is the height of the Pax Romana, controls the known world, wields all the power in the world. But if you look at the criticisms leveled throughout Revelation, and the 4 horsemen in particular, one is a criticism that Rome is being economically unjust
Mm-hmm.
and exploiting the people. Another is that Rome is being really violent, the plague horse of war. And so these criticisms are the beast has taken over God's good creation, and is buying and selling the children of God and harming them. And so the Christians are called to resist the way things are. And then there's the kind of parallel fight in heaven, because again, all apocalypses, you have the fight on earth and you have the fight in heaven. And even though it looks like you've lost the fight on earth, who's gonna overthrow Rome? Not these 5 guys in a cave. You are supposed to be reassured that there is a similar fight in heaven happening. And so we get the Michael thing. One of the kind of saving graces of Revelation is the stuff at the end, right? You have this big, lumbering, really violent beast, because all of the violent stuff is from the beast. The war, the plague, the stuff with the blood comes from what the beast is doing, mucking around and hurting people. The thing that overcomes the beast is the entry of the lamb, the slaughtered lamb, who is Christ. So the central metaphor of Revelation is that this massive beast that is that has taken over the world, that seems unstoppable, that is wielding all the violence and all the power and all the might and all the armies, that wields full economic control over everyone, that is buying and selling people, is overcome not with violence, but with a slaughtered lamb, like the most weak, innocent thing. That's what overthrows the beast. And it does. So it's this massive inversion,
Yeah.
right? But contrary to the whole rapture thing, the lamb doesn't conquer through more violence. The lamb conquers through the power of self-offering, and so the beast falls. Only it were that easy, yeah. Um,
If only it were that easy, then
but it
everybody's just
and then
happy.
the kind of like coda to this is the part that, at least in our tradition, we read at funerals and at kind of the end of the year, is when God comes down and dwells with people. That creation is renewed and restored because the beast has been defeated, sin has been overcome, the lamb is restored, and the dwelling place is with humanity. And so the end image of Revelation is that God comes down into creation and lives with us. So God doesn't destroy creation, God redeems it, lives within it, and that's the final image of the book. So again, it's a complete reversal of this rapture stuff.
So I guess the question I have is this, because I know that I'm not looking at this
Mhm.
absolutely correctly, because if I'm looking at the canon of scripture as like these things at the very beginning are written much earlier and then these things at the very end are written much later. We know that that's not necessarily the case because a lot of the text is given from secondhand accounts and by testimony and compiled at different times. So it's not necessarily fair to say that everything that came before the book of Revelation was necessarily written before that book was written.
Mhm.
But if we look at scripture prior to Revelation, it seems like people are able to kind of speak kind of freely. Like if we look at Paul's letters or letters of authors of
Mhm.
other epistles, John, stuff like that, they kind of talk about church stuff pretty
Yeah.
openly. And you mentioned that this is all coded language and this is all offered as criticism of empire and all these things. Why is it that the author of Revelation can't just speak about it freely? Why does he have to use all of this weird coded language to talk about this stuff?
Well, if you notice, Paul does not criticize Rome. Um, Paul is a Roman citizen, which is one of the ways that he was able to do what he did. Um, and Paul should probably do like another another recording on Paul. Paul was a one of the things that I have grown to appreciate Paul is that Paul was a egomaniacal doofus. However, he he knew how to wield his privilege um pretty well. There are, I think it's an Acts where he gets arrested at one point. Um and they don't realize who he is. And so he starts saying, "I'm a Roman citizen. You have to pull me before not just this judge. I want to testify about Jesus to the governor. Get me to the governor. I'm a Roman citizen. You have to get me to a governor. Um and you have to treat these people better." He was able to travel the way he did, and he was able to communicate as freely as he did because he held the title of citizen. So he had rights and he had some protection under the law. He also, though, pulls his punches when he talks about the structure of Rome. So I think Romans 13, he talks about obey those in authority over you. When he starts talking about authority, and there are huge debates about this um, in scholarship world, but when he starts talking about household codes and a lot of the stuff that kind of comes up when we start talking about um, gender roles, he is echoing Roman household codes that the man is in charge and then the women listen. So when he explicitly talks about gender roles, like in Ephesians, Paul is echoing the structure of Roman society. When he obliquely talks about it, um, he is not echoing Roman uh, household codes because we got Phoebe running around and we've got Lydia, and we know Paul is getting bankrolled from women. And we know he's giving Junia the letter to carry back. So he's being very careful. Um, so he is playing. He's a political animal, is Paul. And it was also easier for some people in some places to do things. The persecutions weren't coordinated. They were sporadic. They were much worse in some places than they were in others. So it's probable that John's community, for whatever reason, was really having a hard time, and wanted to be more explicit in their criticism, and wanted the protection of coding.
So then is it safe to assume that the coded language that was used in Revelation is because they're worried about, well, what if the government gets a hold of this? Are they gonna come after? Is that where it comes from, or where does it come from?
A little bit. It's also sort of just the way you would write an apocalypse.
Sure.
It was a lot more of of just sort of a genre tick. And part of it, I think I'm making it sound a little too Dan Brownish. Part of it part of it is just the way you wrote in Greek and Hebrew.
Right.
Hebrew didn't have, I don't want to speak to modern Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew didn't have different numerals for
Got it.
numbers. You would just reuse the letters. And so it was really, people sort of made a hobby of, what is the number of your name? And then that's an auspicious number for you. The kind of back and forth between numbers and letters is was really common, still is. It's a thing in Kabbalah. Um, and so, adding up the numbers to make 666, which is the number of the beast, the text actually says his name is Nero. So it's pretty, like, the text tells you what it's doing, but it's also a way of being like, look, we're being sneaky. Aren't you smart? You have this information and not everyone does. Like, it's a way of making the information a little bit more attractive because you have to dig for it. And then aren't you smart because you know it. And we see the same sort of thing with, is a bad comparison, but a little bit with conspiracy theories today. This is a way of making you feel smart. So
So then
you get it. Other people
so then
don't.
I guess the question that I have, that I think that maybe some of the folks who are gonna be listening maybe having the same question, is why does this matter to us? You talk about, we read this stuff as we get closer to Christmas every year, and how do we as people of faith, like how does this apply to us now? I'm gonna timestamp it a little bit in 2025. Like, why does this matter to us?
Well, the world is still a pretty big mess.
Right.
Um, things not going great. Um, and I love Revelation because it reminds me that when things are at their worst, um, the people of God have always found hope that God is going to come and fix it. That is what God does. God redeems the world. God frees the prisoner. God uh, makes peace out of war. God overthrows the empire. That is what God does. And no empire has lasted, not an economic one, not a political one. And even when it feels like, we have no power whatsoever, Revelation tells us that God steps in somehow, even when we can't see it, even when it feels like, we're all alone and everything we've done is pointless. God steps in and fixes it. One of the things that kind of keeps me coming back to Revelation is, uh, most of the spirituals, the Negro spirituals, are taken from Revelation. Um, the text, the Bible texts that they would sing, um, are about the coming of the apocalypse. And if you are kind of brought up in the white church, that's gonna sound terrifying. We're used to that being terrifying. But if you are a slave and you have no power and you know, have very few choices, the idea that there's gonna be a day when God comes down and tells the people who have mistreated you so horribly that they are wrong and that you deserve freedom is a beautiful thing. You know, and the songs are really happy. Like, oh, what a beautiful morning when the stars begin to fall. Like, on that great getting up morning, I'm gonna
Soon and very soon.
fare thee well, soon and very soon. Like, and I know my ancestors would hear people singing in the fields and think, "Oh, they're just so happy, they're just so faithful." Yeah, they were counting the days.
Right.
Um, it was not like a passive happy, it was a, "Jesus, hurry you on up." That is a powerful revolutionary hope that God is not gonna let this world remain as broken as it is, and we get to help with that project. And we also need to be aware that things will progress, like,
Yeah.
and I find that really comforting, particularly in those moments where it feels like there's nothing else to do, and
Well, it's good. It serves as a great reminder to us too that like going back to what we talked about at the top, this idea that like the rapture and all this stuff is like, hey, make sure that you're being good so that you get to go to Sky Daddy and swim in the milkshake pool. That's not really what's going on here. It's a
right.
reminder to us that everything about this faith that we have found is a little subversive.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it is a reminder to those of us who are privileged, hey, get your you know what together because God's paying attention and it's like you said, like we have a role in correcting the wrongs that have kind of bled into the world. And for those that are marginalized, hold on, help is on the way. Hope is coming and you are not forgotten. And I think that that is a beautiful reminder for us. And it helps me as somebody who's in a pew on Sundays and at Christmas and stuff to like look and Easter and like and look at this stuff and be like, oh, this isn't like scary dragon story time. This is a reminder of how we should be operating as a body, I think.
Yeah, that we don't have to be afraid of the dragon.
Right.
Like, the dragon lost. The dragon lost a long time ago, and we just have to live in the reality of the dragon having lost. This week, I went to a talk by, a Palestinian writer named Baha Hilo, and one of the things that he said that I found really moving, is he said, "We don't resist because we know what will happen."
Mm.
He said, "I have no idea what will happen. I it's probably bad things, but I don't resist because I think it'll work. I resist because I know who I am, and I resist because I know that they will fail, and I resist because I owe it to myself and the reality that I hold to that we are free and nothing can change that, and that's why I resist. And one day, that will be evident." And I was like, "Oh, there we go. That
There it is.
there it is. That's revelation." And so I'm like, I'm gonna like write that down and like remember that. That's why. That's why we remember. That's why we resist.
So, friends, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of For the Rest of Us. And for the rest of us, a little bit of homework. Maybe if you got time, try tackling a little bit of Revelation every once in a while. Don't just buckle in and like try and knock the whole thing out front to back. Take it a little bit piece by piece. Think about it, pray about it, meditate, whatever you got to do with it. Realize that it's not quite so scary. If you have things that you would like answers for the rest of us on, you can actually visit our website, cnyepiscopal.org, and head to our podcast page. There's a whole section for the rest of us. You could submit a question or a comment, or wherever you listen to your podcast, you can ask questions like on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just like last time, Megan, I asked you to give us one thing to do. And so this week, for the rest of us, what is a dish or a food that you think that we should try? Something new that maybe we haven't.
Massaman curry.
Ooh.
Try Massaman curry. Makes the world a better place.
There you go. And coming from a priest, that's not a suggestion. It's an order. Thank you so much for joining us again this week, and we will talk to you soon. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for stopping by and checking out For the Rest of Us with Ken and Megan. If you like the show, maybe subscribe, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and we hope to see you again next time. For the Rest of Us is a production of the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York.